Hi everyone, I'm Christina Batista and welcome back. Today what we're going to be making is a Portuguese steak sandwich. Now the reason why it's a Portuguese steak sandwich is we're using pork instead of using beef, and we're also going to flavour it with some smoky paprika and some bay leaves. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is we want to marinate these steaks. Now the reason why is because we want that flavour to really permeate through the meat, and we also want the wine that we're going to add to it to start breaking down those proteins so our steak is nice and tender. What I have here is just some Scotch fillet steaks. With the Scotch fillet steak, what you want to do is either get your butcher to cut them really thinly, or you need to flatten them out. So mine are quite thick. We're going to flatten them out by putting them in between some baking paper. And just using our friendly mallet. Now, as you can see, these steaks, they're really nice and thin now, so they're not going to take a lot of time to cook, which is exactly what we're after. Now what we're going to do is make our marinade. What I have here is some smoky paprika and some bay leaves. In Portuguese cuisine, we use a lot of these ingredients. If you can't get smoky paprika, you can use just a normal sweet paprika, but I highly suggest looking for this. You can get it from most supermarkets these days. Okay. We're also going to tear up the bay leaves. Next, it's just a good pinch of salt, some cracked black pepper, and some white wine. When it comes to the white wine, just use whatever you have on hand. I am using a dry white wine, but whatever you like to drink, use in your marinade, because the flavors of that wine is going to end up infusing into that meat and carry on in that. So you don't want something that you're not going to drink. And lastly, I'm just going to give it a good splash of some olive oil. Okay. Now what we're going to do is cover these and put them in the fridge. Best thing to do is marinate it for a couple of hours, if not overnight. The longer you marinate it, the longer the wine has to really break down those proteins and give you a really tender pork steak. So next what we want to do is we want to start prepping our onions. A couple of tips when cutting onions. First, use a cold onion. Stick it in the fridge for a few hours beforehand. I just store mine in the fridge normally anyway. Second tip, you need a really sharp knife. The sharper the knife, the cleaner the cut, and so then you're not going to be bruising the onion and therefore creating those vapors that are then going to make you cry. I'll probably still end up crying, but the tears won't be as much as if I was using a blunt knife. So let's get chopping. So I'm just going to cut the tip off. I'm going to cut it in half. And then peel off that top layer. Now what you want to do is you want to tuck your fingers back here, and then we're going to use a rocking motion when cutting the onions. So you're rocking back and forth. Nice clean cuts. You get to about here, flip the onion over and continue. Okay. And so again, make sure you tuck your fingers behind. Leave a bit of distance between your fingers and the knife. See? No tears. Yay! Okay. So I'm going to put these in a bowl and get them off to one side, where we're going to be cooking these in some pork lard later. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work on our chips that we're going to serve on the side of our steak sandwich. Okay, I've just got some really nice long potatoes, and I have a mandolin here that I've just bought at the shops. Comes with a few teeth. Make sure you always use the guard. Fail. There we go. And then just slide it up and down. Now that our potatoes are really thinly julienned, what we're going to do is the same with an apple. I'm just using some pink lady apples. The reason why I've decided to go pink lady apples is because I really like the flavour. They're a little bit sweeter than a Granny Smith and not as blech as a red apple. So again, using our guard, we're going to run this up and down. Flip it over and then continue. Now the reason why I'm using mandolin is that there is no way that I could get such a consistently thin slice or julienne using a knife that I could with using this mandolin. If you don't have one, by all means, use a knife, but it just makes your life so much easier. Okay, so we're going to put these in our bowl. Pop this off to the side. Okay. Now I've got some bright purple cabbage here. Going to cut the wedge, and then using a knife, we're going to cut it as finely as we can. So what we're doing here is we're basically making like a mock coleslaw. I'm not going to use any mayonnaise or anything like that to dress it. I'm just going to use a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of white wine vinegar, which is also going to help stop the apples from going brown. And now we're going to quickly dress it. So want to do equal quantities. And then I'm going to hit it with a good pinch of salt. This is also going to help draw out some of the moisture from that cabbage. Good crack of pepper. Then I'm going to pop this off to one side until we need it to serve. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly grab my pork steaks from the fridge. These I put marinating last night, so they're beautifully tender. We're going to head over to the stove and cook these bad boys up. Hi, welcome back. I don't know why I said welcome back, because you haven't really gone anywhere. What we're going to work on now are our onions. What we want to do is cook them in some pork lard. Pork lard is basically pork fat. It's the best thing on the planet, and once you try it, you will love it. If you can't find pork lard, and it is available at most supermarkets, you could use butter instead. If you're going to use butter, make sure you add just a touch of oil, which is going to prevent it from burning. But with pork lard, you're able to cook things at a really high temperature with it, so we don't need to worry about adding oil to it. Great thing about using the pork lard is that it's going to continue that porky flavor throughout our sandwich. And once you have onions that have been cooked in pork lard, you're gonna love it. Okay, so we've got our pan on a medium-high heat. Melting that pork lard. Now we're going to add our sliced onions from earlier. Now when you add the onions, you don't want a really loud sizzle because we're not wanting a lot of color on them to begin with. We're really wanting to, what we're really wanting to do is actually break them down a little bit. To help do that, we're going to add a pinch of salt. and some black pepper. I'm also going to add a bay leaf to it. So we've used the bay leaf in the pork and now we're going to add it into the onion. So as you can see, we're using the same flavors throughout this sandwich. It's going to taste amazing. Now while our onions are going, we're going to work on the pork. So let's get pan on, want it nice and hot. And again, we're going to add a little bit more pork lard. Now that our pork lard is melted, we're going to add our pork that we've had marinating in our fridge. Now be careful with this because it will spit. Yeah, baby. Now we're going to cook these for about 2 minutes on either side. And again, I'm just going to add just a tiny little bit more salt onto it. And some more pepper. Make sure you keep an eye on your onions. Again, we're not wanting a lot of colour on them. We're really just wanting to sweat them down. Now I'm just going to check on this pork. Oh yeah, it's ready to turn. Now with the pork, we've created a really nice crust on it. There's some really nice caramelization that's happened. We've got some beautiful grill marks on it as well. This is going to be one tasty pork sandwich. Our pork's now cooked, so what we're going to do is take it out and put it on a plate to rest. While it's resting, we're going to pour our marinade into the pan. We're going to cook it down a little bit until it thickens nicely. And we're going to pour that over our pork steaks. That's also going to help it stay nice and moist. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to toast our bread off in this pan that we've cooked the pork in. It's going to taste amazing. Now that our sauce is reduced nicely, it's nice and thick, I'm going to pour it over our pork steaks. And we're just going to let them sit in that juice, marinate, get to know each other. I have some really yummy crusty rolls here. And so I'm just going to put these in the grill pan. Now remember, we've cooked our pork in that. So the flavor that's in there is going to permeate through that bread. It's also going to give it a nice crust. So when you bite into it, that porky goodness. Oh. Our onions are coming along really nicely. There are some that are a little bit colored, as you can see, and then there are others that are nice and translucent, and that's exactly what we want. And to turn those off. These onions are great stored in the fridge. The fat will then re-solidify, but then you just take a scoop out, you warm them up, great on eggs in the morning. Okay, and check our bread. Yep, our bread's nice and toasted. There's not too much colour on it. And now it's time to make the pork sandwiches. Now it's time to plate up our sandwiches, but before we do, let's cook our hot chips. Okay. Just gonna get them in here. I've just turned my deep fryer up to 180. My tip for hot chips is you cook them until they float. Once they float, they're cooked. Okay, let's get these in here. That was a close call. Okay, and now we're going to assemble our pork sandwiches. So we're going to start off with the bread that we've toasted. We're going to top that off with just a salad mix that I've picked up from the greengrocer. You can use whatever salad leaf you have, no big issue. And then we're going to top it with our pork. So what I've just done is turn that a little bit. As you can see, it's beautiful and shiny. Now this dish is a great alternative for any Sunday barbecue that you're having. You don't want to have, just your normal steak sandwiches. These are great, and I can guarantee you that none of your guests have had them before. Okay. Next, we're going to top our pork with our beautifully caramelized onions. Okay. And now we have our coleslaw mix. Just going to, with my hands, don't be afraid to use your hands when you're cooking. Then I'm going to pile this on top of my onion mix. Now, pork and apple is a great combination, as is pork and cabbage. So you know this is going to taste amazing. Now let's have a quick look at these chips. That's perfect. As you can see, they're beautifully golden, and they're going to be great right next to these. Okay. Plate it up with top. And we're going to get these really crunchy chips. Put them on the side like so. Hit them with a little bit of salt. Okay. And there you have it, my Portuguese steak sandwich. Now, if you enjoyed this recipe, go to my website, christinabatista.com.au for this recipe and more.